A happy and blessed Guru Purnima to everyone. We are very fortunate to gather together both in person and online and honor the Guru and the Guru Tattva. So, as you mentioned, Bhagavatam, it reminded me of one dialogue that a devotee had with Ramana Maharshi. He was asking about Guru, and interestingly, Ramana Maharishi gave the episode of Bhagavatam of the story of Dattatreya and how he had 24 gurus, because this person was asking about who is a guru and does it have to be a person and what is the nature of a guru. It's very important to understand the tattva or the principle of guru is not a person, though it can come through a person. And the greatest example of that, of course, we have is Ramana Maharishi. His very presence, just looking into his eyes, reading his teachings, and singing the works he has done, all of this is a flow of grace, because Ramana Maharishi is a living embodiment of the whole principle of all the Upanishads and Gita and all the scriptures. And therefore, when we listen to anything that's come from Sri Ramana Maharishi, or when we simply even look at the picture and his eyes, that is already the flow of grace, which is beyond what words can ever describe. But it's also important to recognize that the Guru Tattva involves two people. One is the Guru and the other is the student. And without the student, there cannot be the transmission of Guru Tattva. So that's why the example of Dattatreya is very pertinent. And as we all know, the story of Dattatreya that Ramana Maharishi, in fact, beautifully narrated. One of the great qualities of Ramana Maharishi was that many people may not know is that he was also a great storyteller, and he would narrate stories in an extremely moving way. And when it comes to stories that involve devotion, for example, many people are not aware of it, but Ramana Maharishi will not even be able to complete the story. He will have tears in his eyes and he will stop midway, unable to complete. He was full of the symptoms of a highest devotee, being a jnani, thus demonstrating that the highest pinnacle of jnana and bhakti are one and the same. So he also has narrated the story of Dattatreya, and that story is very pertinent to Guru Tattva. As some of you may know, Dattatreya says that I learned from 24 gurus. So Ramana Maharishi gave all the 24 gurus listed in Bhagavatam, and he also gave the teaching from each of them. So the number 24 is first of all very important in a couple of ways, because first of all, as we know, there are 24 hours in the day. So it's a symbolism that every moment through the day we are to be connected with the Guru. So Guru is not to be isolated to a particular time, place, or form, but he is available every moment. And that's why 24 symbolizes that He is available the whole day for us if we are only ready. It is very much like the sun that shines all day, and we have to simply look up to the sun to see the sun. If we close the eyes, then it's dark. That's not the fault of the sun. So similarly, the Guru is always available 24 hours. The second symbolism also important is that um, the Prakriti, as we call it, the material nature, is known to have 24 categories. So this comes in Sankhya Yoga, that there are 24 categories of material nature. So there are the five subtle elements called the tanmatras: sound, touch, sight, taste, and smell. And then corresponding gross elements are there, which are space, air, fire, water, and earth. And then there are five sense faculties we have, which are hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, and touching. And then there are five what is called karmendriyas, or action faculties we have, which is speaking, holding, moving, excreting, and reproducing. So these make 20. And then there are four inner faculties, which is called mana, buddhi, chitta, ahankara, or mind, intellect, memory, and ego. So there is 24 categories of prakriti, and therefore again it shows that all of space, all of material nature is available to us as a guru, because every aspect of this material nature is the same energy of the one supreme being. All there is just the one supreme being that has taken these forms of 24 categories and the various apparently diverse names and forms. So there is that symbolism as well. And so there are 24 gurus that Ramana Maharishi explained from Bhagavatam, and we don't have to go through all the 24. There are many wonderful examples in that. Just for instance, earth is itself a guru, because earth demonstrates to us the principle of being patient and tolerant. It is very important for us to have these qualities in order to be a true devotee. And there is one verse, in fact, in Bhagavad Gita, which summarizes this beautifully, the qualities of a devotee. Krishna says that, this is in 12th chapter, he says, Yasman no dvijate loko, lokan no dvijate chayah, harsha marsha bhayodvegair, muktaha yah sacha me priyah. It's a very favorite verse of mine, because it very practically says that one who is dear to me, Krishna says, is one who doesn't cause any disturbance to others, one who is not disturbed by anyone, and who is free of excitement, impatience, fear, and anxiety. So these are the qualities that represent or that symbolize a true devotee, a true sadhaka. And these are the qualities we have to learn. And this is how our sadhana fructifies and flowers. So when we look at the elements, they represent all these qualities. All the five elements, earth, water, fire, air, and space, they are always unaffected by whatever happens. They have their own flow. And various aspects of earth, for example, if you take something like a tree, as Bhagavatam mentions in that episode, if you take a tree, that's a great example for us as a guru, to show that one can remain completely still and peaceful no matter who comes to us, and be of service to them. The simple principle demonstrated by the tree is that the tree serves whoever comes to them, whether by offering flowers and fruits or shade, or even if they want to cut and take the wood. So the principle of service is demonstrated by tree, and therefore there is that. But in general, all the five elements are always without being any attachment, without being any ups and downs, they are always the same in order, each having its own quality: water being pure, fire being radiant, air being unattached, moving from whether it's a bad smell or a good smell, it doesn't carry it for too long, it just moves the same way. Earth being tolerant, as we said, and space being untouched by whatever is there in the space. And then there are various other aspects of nature that Dattatreya talks about, such as how a fish gets hooked because of taste, or how a deer gets hooked because of sound. So these are all very practical instructions that are there. So the essence of all this is that when we observe anyone or anything, if we are a student, the Guru is available. So the quality of the student is what determines the Guru, because as we know, even in the case of as great a master as Ramana Maharishi, there were those who were physically present next to him, and they, in fact, even some of them were antagonistic. There were court cases filed and all kinds of things people do because of their own egoic tendencies. And there were even examples of how there were some petty sadhus who even were so inimical towards Raman Maharishi and tried to hurt him physically even. So the physical proximity with the Guru is a wonderful thing, but it does not guarantee that we get the Guru's grace as long as we are not being the right sincere student. And on the other hand, if you are a sincere student, then physical proximity doesn't really matter. Of course, it's wonderful to be in the physical proximity of a living Guru, or even in the presence of his shrine. When we go to, for instance, and go to Ramanashram, let's say, and we sit in the old hall, as many of us here have, I'm sure, experienced it, the old hall where Ramana Maharishi sat for around 25 years in the same place. That place has great power. And similarly, the Arunachala mountain and the beautiful Virupaksha and Skandashram caves that are there, they have great potency. And yet, what's also important is, as someone said, those who live there, they even tend to take that for granted. The physical proximity sometimes may make us not appreciate the greatness of a, a, a person or a place, or a shrine even. So this is something that someone told me in Tiruvannamalai, that people come to Tiruvannamalai with a lot of reverence, but if they stay here for a long time, they tend to take it for granted and then they go about with other worldly interests. So in some sense, it is that's why maybe even better to have a yearning to be there. As it is said in many places, a yearning to be there is greater than even being there, because the yearning keeps us always connected in the heart. And when we recognize that the presence of the Guru is in the heart and is found in every aspect of nature around us, then that yearning turns into finding him here and now, which is the true essence of Guru Tattva. So Ramana Maharishi never tired of pointing out to people whenever they said something about his body, and said he would say, they would say something like Bhagwan is sick or something like that. He would say, who do you think Bhagwan is? Is this do you take this body to be Bhagwan? So the core mistake we make with our own self, we project it onto the Guru as well, by just as we take the body to be ourself, we take the body to be Guru, and we therefore limit it. That's something that we have to be very aware of, because on the one hand, of course, the physical presence, or even a picture of Ramana Maharishi flows with grace. And to look into the eyes of Ramana Maharishi and to look at his lotus feet, all of this has great power, because there was no person there. The most important thing is, when someone is simply there as an embodiment of grace, then the very physical body becomes a temple of grace. And that is what is the case with Ramana Maharishi particularly. So when we look at the physical form of Ramana Maharishi, therefore we see the flow of grace in every aspect. And yet, it is also important, as he constantly told us to, is to not isolate him to any form or any place or any time, but see that he is present here and now as our own heart within, and as all that is there without, which is ready to teach us. Through the story of Dhruva in Bhagavatam, it's very interesting to see that from the perspective of Guru also. So I will share that quickly as well. So the story is that he was a small boy who was insulted by his stepmother, telling him that you are not fit to go to the throne. If you want to go to the throne, pray to God and be born in my womb, because you are not fit for that. The boy cries and goes to his mother, and the mother, who is helpless because the stepmother is the favorite of the king, so the mother tells him, after all, your stepmother is right. Our only recourse is to pray to God. So go to the Supreme Being and pray to Him. And the boy takes it to his heart, and then he goes to the forest. He comes across the great sage Narada. Narada first dissuades him because he says, you are a young boy. This is very difficult to realize God at this age. But the boy is undaunted. He says, no, I need to do this. And therefore, Narada gracefully gives him the teaching and the mantra. Then the boy does penance, gets a glorious vision of the Supreme Being. And yet, the story doesn't end there, because after that, because he still had some desire to prove his stepmother wrong, he still had a seed of worldliness in him that was not gone even after the great darshan of the Supreme Being. And so, what happens is, later something happens in terms of an attack on his brother by who are called as yakshas, and so he unleashes his fury with great anger on them, and he starts killing them mercilessly, overcome by a feeling of revenge and anger. And then his grandfather comes, Manu, and instructs him that this is not right to give in to anger. You have, after all, been blessed by Bhagavan himself with a direct vision. So please give up this anger and turn within. He realizes his folly. Then the Yaksha's Lord Kubera also gives him the same advice. Then finally, he takes up to abiding within and contemplating on the Supreme Being, the pure consciousness within, and thereby he attains the eternal abode. This is the story. Part of the reason I thought I'll share the story is because Bhagavatam says that it is very auspicious to listen to this story of Dhruva on a full moon day. And today being full moon and Guru Purnima, I thought it will be good to narrate the story briefly, but also draw out the principle of Guru from here, which is not something Bhagavatam explicitly talks, but we can deduce from it. First of all, if we look at Dhruva, his first guru was interestingly his stepmother. His stepmother insulted him, and that became the impetus for him to go and do penance. So, the lesson from this for us is when something goes wrong, either we are insulted or we face a failure or calamity or anything of that nature, instead of getting dejected, if we recognize that the only recourse in this world is the only thing that is permanent, eternal, is the Supreme Being, then every failure becomes an act of grace. Because when we see success in the world, it can easily puff up the ego. In that case, if Dhruva was allowed to sit on the throne on the lap of his father, we would have probably not had the story of Dhruva. So it was the stepmother that was instrumental in Dhruva becoming Dhruva. So similarly, every obstacle, every great calamity we face is a great blessing. And this is something Kunti also says in Bhagavatam. She tells Krishna, please give me suffering because every suffering is a way for me to learn and surrender fully unto you. So, interestingly, that reminds me when Paramahamsa Yogananda came to meet Ramana Maharishi, I'm sure some of you are aware of this. He came, and one of the things he was very particular in asking about was suffering. He said, why is there suffering in this world when God is so compassionate? And this is a very standard question that is asked all the time. Bhagavatam gives a beautiful answer, and Ramana Maharishi gave the same answer. He said simply and very in his own way, in very pithy terms, he said, because suffering is the way. That's all he said. So that is pregnant with a lot of meaning. So this is exactly what Kunti says in Bhagavatam. This is exactly what we learn from Dhruva's story. Suffering is what makes us turn towards God, and therefore Bhagavan says suffering is the way. When he told Yogananda, his suffering is the way, because suffering is also a guru. And so that's the first guru Dhruva has. Next is his mother. So this is where his mother, instead of consoling him or instead of telling him some other ways to distract his mind, she says, go and surrender unto God because there is no other recourse for us. So that is a lesson for us too, especially if we are parents, to our own children, that to teach this is the greatest thing we can offer as a gift to children. To not give them material gifts or even the best of education, but what Suniti, the mother of Dhruva, did is the greatest blessing, and so therefore she is the next guru to Dhruva in directing him towards Bhagavan. And that is something we can all learn from, both as a student and also as a parent. Then there is Narada, of course, who is the main guru of Dhruva. who comes and gives him, first tests the disciple by dissuading him, saying, "You don't have to do all this." But then Dhruva insists. So here we can learn again the quality of the student. Dhruva demonstrated what is known as Shraddha. Shraddha is the essential ingredient of a student, a seeker, a devotee. Krishna says, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. The one with Shraddha attains realization. Therefore, the greatest guru, even Narada, comes in person. Without Shraddha, he was not ready to teach him. He wanted to first test whether Dhruva has Shraddha. So, this is again a lesson to us that we may be fortunate to come to the lotus feet of a guru as great as Ramana Maharishi. But if we don't have Shraddha, then even Ramana Maharishi cannot help us. He has said it many times also that the inquiry and surrender can be shown by the guru, but the devotee, the seeker, has to engage in it and not simply expect the guru to do it for him. So, Dhruva demonstrates that by showing Narada that I do not want anything else except what my mother told me, which is to realize the vision of God and get his boon and nothing else. And when Narada says you can go and play, this is the age to play, and all the rest, he does not listen to that. He says, no, I am very firm in my resolve. I need only one thing. And so that firmness of resolve is something we all need to learn in order to truly partake of the Guru Tattva. Because without the firmness of resolve, single pointedness, in fact, that reminds the same thing comes in Dattatreya's story. Dattatreya, one of the 24 gurus, is an archer. Just like Arjuna, he meets with an archer who is about to aim at a bird, and Dattatreya talks to him. He doesn't even hear those words. He is fully, completely focused on the bird. And Dattatreya says, I learned from him single pointedness. So, similarly, Dhruva also demonstrates single pointedness, the resolve, the Shraddha, the earnestness, and that is essential ingredient to get the right teaching. But then the other important thing that comes in this is Manu is his teacher, as we see, because Dhruva, even getting the vision of the Lord and giving the most beautiful prayers, one of the most beautiful prayers of Bhagavatam comes when Dhruva glorifies the Supreme Lord, beholding him. But despite that, he is overcome by anger and the seed of ignorance is still there in him. And this is a lesson for all of us again that one has to be alert even if one has a direct vision of the Supreme Lord. Even if Krishna comes in front of us, it does not guarantee that we will be free of all the um, what is known as inner enemies: anger, greed, envy, delusion, lust, and pride. These six enemies that it is said, they have to be purified by our own alertness and awareness. And so there, Manu comes and gives him this instruction that you have to be alert every moment. You had the vision of the Lord, but you have fallen down from it by this anger. Please go back to see within. That which you saw without as a vision is the one that is abiding within, and therefore find him. So, this is another great teaching from that story, that the guru we see without has to be realized within. Until then, we are not complete in our realization. So when we glorify the Guru, we have to recognize that we are not just glorifying a particular event in history, which is a very glorious event, because especially in the case of Ramana Maharishi, the word Maharishi, by the way, is a very unique word that Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni gave for a particular reason. I don't know if many are aware of it. Traditionally, the word Maharishi is given only to one who shows a new way or who reveals a new way. So Kavyakanta Ganapati Muni was struggling, having read all the scriptures, done all the tapas, all the japa, and Ramana Maharishi pointed this way of finding out who is doing the japa, who is doing the tapas, inquiring within and surrendering. So Ganapati Muni said, "You are Maharishi because, according to the scriptures, one who shows a new way or who reveals a hidden way." This is not entirely new because everything is there. Even Bhagavatam has this, but it was forgotten. If you look at the history of Bharat in the last 1,000 or more years, while there was a great current of devotion, it was not coupled with jnana, at least overtly, and therefore many who were inclined towards rational questioning and so on, they found bhakti to be sentimental and they were dismissing it. And so, at the right time, as science was taking off and the modern era came, Ramana Maharshi was sent to reveal that the most rational inquiry leads us to surrender. So, surrender is not some sentimental activity, but the most rational realization of the supreme truth, and therefore because he revealed it, he is Maharishi, and it's a very special name, Maharishi. So but the point what we were saying was, even with this Maharishi, with the greatest guru as Ramana Maharishi, we are not free of the inner enemies. Even after coming into his ambit, even after reading his teachings, unless we are alert, and that is what Manu teaches Dhruva, that even after beholding Krishna directly, he was still not free of it. And therefore, that is true of all of us too, that even after coming into the umbrella of grace of Ramana Maharishi, we still have to remain very alert, and thereby we are able to be free of all these impurities and realize Bhagavan within. So, the whole purpose of Guru Purnima is to recognize that the Guru who shines without is also shining within. And in fact, there is a slight symbolism about it too, because Guru Purnima comes during the, at least in Bharat, it comes during monsoon season when there are lots of clouds in the sky. So it is very, normally the sky is covered, and therefore the moon that comes on Guru Purnima is very special because it has to pierce through the clouds in order to give its brightness. And similarly, the Guru pierces through the cloud of darkness of ego and all the other inner enemies in order to reveal our true nature. And when we go to this with that Shraddha that Dhruva demonstrates in the story, which is something that Ramana Maharishi repeatedly exhorted everyone. He said, find out, find out. He didn't, anyone who asks any question, the answer was always, find out who's asking the question. He didn't spoon feed the answer. He didn't say, you are Brahman, because that can be said, and there is truth in that, but that can also simply become a mental affirmation. But if we inquire and find out for ourselves our true nature, then there is a direct realization which is not simply textual or just affirming something. So the direct Upadesha of Ramana Maharshi was find out. So to find out, we need to have the Shraddha, and that Shraddha is what the story of Dhruva also demonstrates. First, by showing that suffering is a great help, great guru. So we have to not flinch from obstacles and challenges and suffering, but embrace them as grace. And then we have to turn towards Bhagavan, and we have to not be satisfied with simply looking at or even reading or even being able to memorize or talk about Bhagavan's teachings, but be able to be alert as Manu instructs, to be every moment alert, so that the Bhagavan within shines for us, and thereby the Guru Purnima, the full moon of the Guru's grace, shines in our heart.